Last night, the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss came under fire. Not because Russia continues to mass its forces on Ukraine's borders, Chinese military aircraft continue to buzz Taiwan, the people of Afghanistan are starving. Oh, and here the Northern Ireland Brexit protocol is on the point of collapse. No. She was savaged for flying to Australia on a government-leased aircraft rather than a commercial flight. It was described as a private jet, implying that it had been rented for a one-off flight and that the trip was said to have cost £500,000. Now, I may be odd, but the words United Kingdom all along the fuselage and the Union Jack emblazoned on the tail fin might just have hinted that it wasn't a private jet, but a government asset. It is on a long lease from a charter company, and how anyone got to £500,000 is literally beyond me. But facts often get in the way of a good story, don't they? And given the government faces no other problems, no Partygate, no investigations, no row over taxation and COVID restrictions and a whole lot more, well, I guess someone somewhere needed a story. By way of background, it was actually David Cameron who embarked on the policy of leased aircraft and/or converted refuelling tankers for the use of senior ministers and the royal family, saying it would save about £750,000 a year compared with chartering flights. Long-haul charters cost on average £6,700 per flying hour, whilst using the Voyager aircraft costs around £2,000. And that's according to the Ministry of Defence. But despite all of that, Ms Truss was pressed on her trip, and she said, "I use the government plane. That's why we have government planes, to enable government ministers to conduct government business. And that's why I flew to Australia. Every government decision is based on value for money. We have a government plane specifically so that ministers like me, in my role as Foreign Secretary, can go and do the work overseas, which is ultimately delivering for the British people." Close quotes. The Foreign Office said the trip was within the rules set by the Ministerial Code. A spokesman added, using the private jet allowed the trip's delegation to travel together and have private discussions on sensitive security matters, that commercial flights were fully booked, and that using a commercial flight would have separated Ms Truss from her delegation and her protection team. It also gave Ms Truss the option of returning to the United Kingdom early, if needs be, for a crisis in Northern Ireland, or in the Ukraine, or anywhere else. It's pointed out that Defence Secretary Ben Wallace was also at those Australia talks, but I'll bet a tin helmet and an anti-tank weapon that if things suddenly hit the fan in Ukraine, he wouldn't have been seeking a seat on the next scheduled flight. He'd have been on the flexible flight offered by Ms Truss's jet quicker than you could say scramble. The talks, incidentally, were about trade, regional security and several other issues. Australia's an important ally under the Chinese threat. It's also an increasingly important trade partner post-Brexit. Mere details, I'm sure, but there they are. It is a storm in a teacup. You know, the Americans don't go bonkers when the president flies around the world in one of his fleet of mighty Boeings, accompanied by all of those big beast cars and other accompanying motorcade vehicles. Germany has just ordered more aircraft to add to its ministerial squadron. Oh, and the French fleet comes in 3 or 4 different sizes. They all do it because it makes financial sense, offers flexibility, and guarantees security. So, if folk want to have a go, get the facts right and think it through. I also want the UK and its government, our nation, our government, to look good abroad. It's part of the brand. I want ministers to be fleet of foot when abroad at a time of crisis, not twiddling their fingers for the next scheduled flight that might have a free seat from wherever they are to wherever they need to be. I want their top teams, their advisors, their security people to be with them all the time. I also quite like the idea that there's room there too for the press to accompany senior ministers on such trips, as long as they pay their way. Finally, by all means take a pop at ministers who screw up, at a government under real pressure for glad-handing gatherings whilst others suffered, for promising much but delivering little on some of the big issues of the day. But let's not bore our viewers, listeners or readers over common-sense decisions that actually end up saving you, dear taxpayer, and me, a bit of money.